Good evening and welcome to Everyday Living. No, I'm not Simone, I'm not Nikki, but I am Ellie, standing in for both of them this evening. I am pleased to announce though, we have got a very exciting show lined up for you this evening. I'm sure it's going to be very spirit-led and very full and probably touch many of you at home. But before we get into it, I would like to introduce Dave, because he is He's here tonight. But Dave, we do have a very special guest, don't we?
Yes, we do. And we've invited Sid and Laura have come over to spend some time with us in the church here in Spain. And so we welcome Sid to the Chaise Lounge.
Thank you. Chaise Lounge.
How are you, Sid? You okay?
I'm wonderful, thanks, Dave.
So we're going to be hearing a little bit of Sid's, quite a lot of Sid's testimony, and it's a very intriguing testimony. I know a lot of people are going to be blessed by it. So, we want to hear from you tonight as well. So I'm waiting. Anita, every week, Ellie gets in touch first of all. So do you want me to go with this email?
Go with it.
She absolutely always on the ball, Anita. Hi, Dave and Ellie. It's great to see you two together. I wish everybody felt like that, Ellie?
Yeah.
Great to see me and you together. I was lucky enough to have been born into a Christian family. I grew up going to a C of E church, so I used to think people speaking in tongues was odd. I didn't understand it then. Now I speak in tongues myself and occasionally sing in tongues too. It's the best thing ever. Then you got to do this for me, because it's what we do on Everyday Living. Poem of the week. Okay.
I wasn't briefed on that, guys. I'm very sorry.
You ready for a poem, Sid?
Yeah,
right, here we go.
Poem.
God knows when we need him. He meets us where we are. He doesn't make us listen, and he doesn't set a bar. He knows our imperfections and each hair on our head, Sid.
Come on.
Yeah. He's follically challenged as well, by the way. Yeah. He will help us if we look to him to make our daily bread. Our faith can come in many ways. No matter what we do, we know that God will love us and he'll always see us through. He can find us in our weakest hour and help us find our way. Our sins are all forgiven if we walk with him each day. There we are.
Well done, Anita. I think that sets the tone very nicely, actually.
We've got a scripture of the week. I don't know what Eddie was there, but it doesn't matter. And it's James 1 verse 6. But let him ask in faith with no doubting, for he who doubts is like a wave of the sea driven and tossed by the wind. So that's James 1 verse 6. And now we have it, and feel free to join in, Ellie. Joke of the week.
I don't know what's coming next, Dave. That's the problem.
It's okay, just go with it, it's fine. That's how I live my life. Joke. Why did a diet coach send her clients to the paint store? She heard you could get thinner there.
Not bad.
Now, watch, it's dropping. It's going to drop in a minute. Paint thinners. Thinner. So have you ever heard of paint thinners? What's the other decorator?
White spirit.
Like a white spirit, it's called a thinner. And so, right.
Let's just move on.
Moving swiftly on. Thank you very much, Anita and Mary there. Thank you for that email. So do send any jokes in as well, and we just love to see Ellie's response to any jokes you might have tonight.
Great. Well, this evening, as we said, we do have a very special guest, and that is Sid. Now, Sid, you have a very special testimony you're going to share with us tonight. And I believe it's actually going to touch a lot of people at home, and that's why Dave has very kindly brought you into our studios. And you're here, you're real. We normally have Skype guests. It's very intriguing. But I think let's start off. Can you just tell us a little bit about yourself? Tell our viewers who you are, and I guess a little bit to your background, or not the whole thing because we'll dive into that, but just a little bit, just to give us a taste of what you've been through.
So my name's Sid. I'm from England. I'm married to Laura. I'm 50 years old tomorrow, and I grew up in a Christian family and didn't take to Christianity in the way that some people that grew up in Christian families do. I have worked, but have been pretty unmanageable in most jobs that I've done. I've run my own business, but while the business was successful, I was a muddle due to drug addiction. So I've been to prison, I've committed lots of crimes, I've been addicted to crack and heroin, and I've been saved, and am glad to say that I live under the grace of our Lord Jesus today, and love life in that way. I'm blessed.
Yeah. So can I just ask you, where was the gateway for you? Where was the first time you ever did something that you thought, hang on a minute, this is we know drugs are wrong, but how did that first start?
drugs or doing things wrong.
So you grew up in a Christian family, and you
Yeah.
said to me earlier on in the week that you weren't rebelling against your parents. You had good, loving parents.
Yeah, I really did.
But you rebelled against kind of what you believed and maybe what the church was telling you at the time.
I think within me there is something that makes me not want to do what I'm told. I don't know when that began, but it's still something that I grapple with today. It's still something that I consider as a character defect. Laura has learned that if she wants me to put the washing out, the last thing she needs to do is to tell me to put the washing out, because I won't want to do it. Yeah. And so I don't know where that...
So has she worked out how to get you to do that yet?
Well, she's working on it. We're all a work in progress, as we said. But I think that's the root of it, because I don't have a traumatic tale of woe in the way that a lot of people do to justify my behaviours. I was just a naughty kid. I just couldn't concentrate and didn't like to be told what to do.
Can I give you some advice? When she says put the washing out, just do it. Because I've learned now just to do it, okay? And I'm happy living that life.
Do you know, I like to think that I've grown to a point where I kind of volunteer to put the washing out from time to time.
Well, sometimes God wants you to put the washing out.
Fair enough. I appreciate the advice.
It's great to hear, because I think we all start somewhere. It starts somewhere, doesn't it? The rebellion starts somewhere, and then it grows and it gets out of control. So for you, that started earlier on, and then suddenly you find you're living this completely different lifestyle to maybe what you ever knew in your life.
I think I did struggle to learn academically. So at school, I couldn't concentrate and didn't enjoy school, because the method of learning that we have in the United Kingdom, or that we did have, was very... teacher speaks, we make notes, or we write the answers, and then we get an exam on it a week later. And that's just not the way that I learn. I learn by doing and experiencing, and I think that's true for a lot of people. Yeah. So I was just disruptive in class, and that kind of snowballed, I think.
Yeah. You like that, Ellie?
Actually, no. I homeschooled myself, so I kind of I travelled a lot when I was younger, and I, to be honest, just chose my subjects and got on and did it. But to be honest, I think when you have to do something off your own back, it's a lot more, you're motivated, I think, a little bit more to do it, because you don't have the fallback of, But I think it's important to note that everyone learns in different ways, and I think that is, as you say, a massive, the United Kingdom does have this learning structure of, even now, I think, we're learning to be a little bit more open to the fact that people are creative. They might be more musically based. They might not be so academically based. People might learn better by physical examples rather than just here's a book. But I mean, you said obviously you kind of ended up being a drug addict and everything like that, and you ended up going to prison. I mean, coming from a Christian family, I guess you said that you feel like it's a character defect. What was really, the moment for you, I guess, where you noticed that your behaviour was kind of changing, or your family noticed that? Because that must be quite difficult. It must have even more pressure to a certain extent, rather than just coming from a family that's maybe not perhaps got spiritual beliefs. But what was that moment that you kind of realised that was a real changing point for you?
I think we often make this misassumption of thinking that there's a moment where this breaks and where this happens. And for me, as with a lot of people, it's far more organic than that, and it happens so gradually that it's insidious and we don't see it taking place. So it starts with small behaviours, and my not being able to concentrate, my disruptive behaviour slotted me in with a certain group of people that appreciated that. They compounded that by laughing at the things I was doing, encouraging me. Then I went around with a certain group of people that normalised that behaviour. From there, that begins to escalate. So I don't know where it was that those behaviours start, but they start really small and they just really gradually creep towards. So at school, I'm misbehaving to a level where I attacked a teacher once. I threw a tub of washing up water over a cooking teacher, and I got expelled from school for writing my name on the wall. And so this is the beginning of these behaviours that would characterise me moving up in life. So getting kicked out of school early, I moved to another school where I learned to get approval from my peer group by misbehaving.
Yeah.
And then I'm attracted to that same group of people that like misbehaving. And then you move out of school and those behaviours continue. Girls laugh and think you're cool because you're misbehaving, and it's just a self-perpetual cycle. And it doesn't really stop until the consequences become so grave, so there's never a point where it goes snap and you say, hang on, I'm misbehaving here. Just that realisation isn't there. And for me, really, I didn't grow up until I was 35, and I started to say, I can't do this anymore, you know? This is exhausting. This life of crime and drugs and people-pleasing and trying to be cool and trying to fit in, misunderstanding what is acceptable and what is approval and why I seek those things. It takes a long while. Maybe I'm slow on the uptake, but it had dire consequences, not just for me, but for my parents, my peer group, my friends, the people that loved and cared about me. It just makes you selfish and self-obsessed.
So let's rephrase that then, when was the first, I guess, age that you started taking drugs?
So I took drugs, do you know, I remember the first time I smoked a joint. We were at a place called 10-pin bowling. I can't remember what the place is called. Someone will remember. It's Martlesham in Ipswich, and we were sat outside. Everyone's kind of kicking around like you do, standing around like you used to stand at the shops or whatever. We're in this car park, and one of my mates said, "Have a go on this," and passed me a joint. And I took 2 puffs on it and just flaked out in the back of this van. I can remember being completely out of control. And I'm not sure I really liked it, but did it because everyone was doing it and it was cool to do it. So that was the first time I ever took drugs. Didn't really become a problem at that point. I think the first time I took heroin was the snapping point and the moment that it became a real problem, and that was in prison. One of my friends had already started taking drugs, and I heard him say to somebody else, "Whatever you do, don't give Sid any gear. I'll be on you. If you give Sid any, Sid's good stuff, he's a good guy." I'm in prison, I don't know what sort of good guy I was. But I heard him say this, and just that same thing that makes me misbehave said, if he's telling people don't give it to Sid, I want some of that, I want to find out what that is. And in prison, the best thing that can happen to you is for time to pass. All you're searching for and waiting for is your release date. And I took some heroin and laid on my bed, and a day just passed. And I don't remember it, I don't know what happened. And it was a comfortable numbness, and a day had passed, and it was like, that was all right.
Can you get addicted to heroin straight away? Because forgive my ignorance here.
I think that when you open Pandora's box, it's really hard to close it again.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that physical addiction takes place immediately, but once you experience the feeling that it gives you, it's really hard to forget that.
Yeah.
And so I might argue that you can become addicted immediately. The physical addiction comes with habitual use.
But the thrill came straight away.
Yeah, that euphoric feeling, or not even euphoric feeling, that the really nice feeling.
Like escapism as well, so you feel like you're escaping from where you are.
And when you're in prison, you want to escape and you want to get out of that situation. While prison wasn't horrendous for me, it just sailed the day through, and in a way that, like, prison's just about waiting, really. I mean, people talk about how horrendous it is, and there are elements of it that are horrendous. But when you spend a lot of time in prison, you realise it's just waiting, it's just boring, and it's just fruitless.
So we're talking about you being in prison here. What could you tell us what was, I guess, the actions and what led up to you being sent to prison? Just to give our viewers an understanding as well of, you know, the things and the events that led up to it.
So I've talked about the insidious nature of the growth of my poor behaviour, the fact that you don't really recognise it, it just takes its own motion and it creeps up gradually. And so My first offence was a dwelling house burglary. Me and 2 friends were told that there was some money and a gun in an upstairs room in an old man's house, and we broke into his house while he was still in the house, put a ladder up to a window and climbed in an upstairs window and rummaged around looking for these things that were supposed to be there. And the police caught us on our way away from there. And so that was my first offence, and it didn't really stop from there. I think when in your mind you don't recognise this as being wrong. I mean, that's not true. You know that it's wrong, but you're too self-centred to care about the consequences. If I really thought about how frightening it was going to be for an old man in his home to have 3 young guys breaking in, that's really, really terrifying
Does
for somebody.
that cross your mind then?
No,
I mean, can you say
not at all.
there's still a moral compass still somewhere, surely,
There
inside?
is. I think I didn't have the ability to think consequentially. So I wasn't thinking this action has a consequence. I was just thinking, this is what we want to do. This is what I want to do. And there must have been an element of, there's 3 of us, we're all saying, you go, you go, you go, you're chicken, that kind of...
egging you on.
Yeah, exactly that.
Yeah.
And so I think that's where it began, and it just grows from there. Initially it was mischief and it was thrill-seeking, and then, like as I said, once drugs entered the scene, then it becomes its own beast and it's out of control, and I'm powerless effectively from that moment onward. I'm powerless. The choice is gone. I've taken the choice away from myself by entering into addiction.
And was there any times during that time where you felt this has got to stop, but you just couldn't because you were out of control?
I think so. In the early stages, it's just fun, and it's a graft, and everyone's doing it, and it's just life. But when the consequences are, we've got no money, and I'm ill every day, and I'm having to break the law consistently, continuously, to get some gear so that I can feel normal. That's when it's no longer fun. That's when it's painful. That's when people get hurt. And that's when depression and anxiety and, like, it's horrendous.
So you went to, I'm just getting this right, the timeline. You went into prison and came out an addict.
No, I went into prison at 17, came out thinking I was the bee's knees, had a badge of honour, I've been to jail, I'm Charlie Big Spuds, I think I'm all that now. It's another layer of thinking I'm super cool.
You're like the craze.
Yeah, exactly that. And it's really not what it is. People think you're a mug because you've gone and got caught, but you come out thinking, I'm the man
Done a
now.
bit of bird.
Watch out for me. Yeah, that's exactly it. And so it took another 2 or 3 years from there for drugs to enter the scene.
And then obviously that's another journey completely.
Yeah.
And right in the midst of all that, is there anything from your? I know because you said you were brought up in the church. Was there anything at all? Because you become a Christian later on, but was there anything from your upbringing that was even God reaching out to you in any of those points?
Yeah, I think so. I think I was constantly aware, not constantly, continuously. There were moments in my behaviour where I knew that my behaviour was not acceptable, but didn't care enough, was too self-centred, too self-obsessed, and just didn't care about other people enough. I'm really ashamed to say it. I hate to say that I was that selfish, thoughtless person that didn't care about the people I was stealing from, the people I was selling drugs to, the people that I was treating really poorly. My parents, I put them through the ringer, and I'm really sorry for the pain and the hurt that I caused. And the man that I am today looks back and thinks, how can you have been like that? But when you're in that, it's like you're in a bubble and you can't see outside of it, you know? And so, it's tough to look back sometimes.
Do you ever, or do you remember a point in your life where you just hit rock bottom?
I think there was a period of time where I'd really had enough. I don't think rock bottom is very different for different people. I think we often make the assumption that rock bottom is being homeless, having no teeth, like being dishevelled and being at the end. And my rock bottom didn't look like that. My rock bottom came emotionally and mentally, where I was just exhausted with trying to stop. I become a Christian, and life was beginning to move in the right direction, but I just couldn't get rid of the obsession to use drugs.
So that's interesting, because you said there that you became a Christian. So can you explain to us what was the process from, obviously you were a drug addict, when did you become a Christian? And explain that to us, how you struggled with that.
Yeah, so I became a Christian on a prison sentence. That was quite a lengthy prison sentence. And I was probably halfway through. I'd been in prison for, I don't know, somewhere between 12 and 15 months. So I was clean, I was going to the gym, I was living a positive life in prison in a controlled environment, and met a really cool chaplain playing football. I thought he was another con. The next day I was walking along the wing and thought, that's that guy who was really good at football that I was talking to yesterday, and he had a dog collar on. And I was like, I thought he was another con. What's going on here? And so I realised that in this kind of moment of clarity, that, like, it's really tough for me to say this, but I've got to be honest, I thought that all Christians were like sandal-wearing nerds.
Yes, so did I.
You know,
yeah.
I really did.
Some of them are.
And so I had a moment where I was like, this guy's a chaplain and he's a cool guy.
And he
like,
threw a book at you.
I didn't, when I sat talking to him.
Did he foul you in the football?
Do you know what? It was really good. It was a left footer, Nick Tivia's name, and I owe him so much.
Yeah.
And I'm in contact with him still now, and he still journeys with me, and I know he's praying for me, and he means so much to me because he made Christianity credible to me, and that's key. That's really, really important. And in that moment, I realised that it's not just nerds and geeks that follow Jesus, and so I became the chaplain in the prison, the chapel orderly it's called. So I'd kind of tidy the room up and get the room ready for different faiths. And I got the chance to ask lots of different faiths, Orthodox priests, nuns, all the different types of faith leaders, lots of questions. Yeah. As a prisoner, people forgive you for asking impertinent questions because you're a con and you don't know better. So I got to ask all kinds of really inappropriate questions to nuns,
you
and
get away with it.
You do get away with it, but it gave me a chance to really have a nosy around within faith, you know, and it was a real period of growth for me. And I gave my life to Christ in prison, and then I spent another year working out what that looks like for me in prison, and was released a new creation. I'd given my life, I had Christ living in me. But it's important to understand that everything doesn't become immediately okay because you've become a Christian. And I think some people will argue the fact that things get tougher when you give your life.
I agree.
You become convicted of sin, and Satan, you're on his radar now, and so life gets tougher. You call yourself to a higher standard of behaviour. But I hadn't addressed what it was that took me to prison. I hadn't addressed the character defects, the behavioural patterns that were woven into my thinking from 20 years worth of drug addiction. And because I hadn't addressed those behaviours, my patterns of behaviour soon slotted into those old familiar tracks. And within 6 months of coming out of prison, as a Christian, I was picking up heroin again. And I'd met my wonderful wife, Laura, and I had everything you could possibly want, and yet I still dealt with tough situations by using drugs because I hadn't addressed the behavioural patterns, I hadn't changed my way of thinking, and so when I hit tough stuff, that was still my coping mechanism.
Did you, can I remember this rightly, your mum said, because your mum's a Christian, she said, and you were asking about this girl Laura who works at the coffee shop, and she said, you go nowhere near her. She's a good Christian girl. And you have nothing to do with her.
That's exactly what she said. She was, put yourself in her shoes.
Yeah.
She was friends with Laura's parents, and I'd spent the last 20, 25 years letting people down. This was going to be another problem that my mum was going to have to sweep the mess up from. She's going to ruin our friendship with these people. Sid's going to come and
it's going to blow up again.
Yeah, exactly that. He's true to form. He's going to come and make a mess of this.
And it did a little bit, I suppose.
Well, and I guess it did a little bit. Fortunately, God was in the situation, and Laura's patient, to say the least. And so that began. But it took another 12 years for me to reach a point where I started to address those behaviours. Maybe even more than that, you know. It's only really quite recently that I've become fully clean and clear of medication, and am now able to really recognise my behaviours and really start to live in the full potential that God created me for.
Yeah, and I asked you the other day, do you ever get to this place where you say, I'm delivered fully, I can walk, somebody's using drugs, there's no temptation anymore for me and that? Or do you just say, actually, you know what, it's always going to be a temptation, so don't put myself in that place?
Do you know what, this is a really interesting theological discussion, because I have to recognise myself as an addict in recovery in order for me to pay attention to the disease that I have. But people would argue that I'm a new creation, and therefore I'm no longer that addict because I'm a new creation. And so somewhere I've got to find where I sit in that. And
there is, and this is a big debate, isn't it? Because I became a Christian, obviously, and then but there are things that I had struggled with before as a Christian that I still sometimes struggle with now. Insecurities, anxiety, even 20 plus years later. And I think that's that residual thing that's still there, that sinful nature that we all fight, is playing on the weaknesses that we always have had. And so even though all things are new, I don't think there's a contradiction here. All things are new, we're a new creation, and yet we're still facing the old issues that we have. But we're facing it from a different perspective, obviously.
I very much agree with that.
Can I ask you a question? So perhaps someone who's not necessarily religious and doesn't believe in God might be watching tonight, and they might say, well, you know, your family, you grew up Christian, right? So your family was Christian, they were good people. I guess, what would you say to someone that turned around to you and said, well, if God's meant to protect and love every one of us, why have you gone through what you've gone through? If that makes sense.
Yeah.
You know, and I guess, did you ever blame God for what you went through?
I never blamed God because I was fully aware that I made the decisions that I made. But I think my mum and dad must have called out to God and said, why? If I can first start by saying my mum and dad were the best mum and dad I've ever seen. I haven't seen anyone be parented better than the way that I was parented. And I mean that sincerely. They disciplined me harshly, but fairly. They loved me unconditionally, even when people said, why are you still visiting him? Why are you still writing to him? Why are you still sending him money? You've got to implement tough love here. He's never going to stop if you keep loving him in this way. And they never, ever gave up. The Bible teaches us to forgive 7 times, 77 times, forever. And they really applied that. They never gave up on me. So if I was speaking to someone that has a child in this situation, I would say, don't enable them, don't give them money, but love them unconditionally. Let them know that no matter what they do, you are there to support them and you love them. And that will be hard sometimes. So, but it was I was always able to recognise that this is all my fault. This is not God's fault. This is not my parents' fault. This is nobody's fault. This is my fault. These are my choices, my consequences. And I think in doing that, I made it a lot easier on myself. I didn't go through prison sentences angry because I'd played the game of cops and robbers and I'd been caught and I was paying the price. And it's really simple when you view it that way. When you feel hard done by, when you feel like the world's out to get me, it's tough, it's angry, it's self-effacing, it's painful. But for me, it wasn't. I'd taken the chance. It had gone badly for me and I was paying the price. And like I was comfortable to live with that.
So can I ask you, there may be those watching who got children who are, you said to me earlier in the week, you never stole from your parents and you never, but there will be those, obviously this is where it gets a little bit grey area, where there'll be parents that are watching now, listening and who are saying, actually, we've had to put some boundaries in, we've had to put some distance maybe even in because they were stealing from us and, you know, it was getting unhealthy. Is that there's different degrees there, isn't there?
I can't sit here on Christian TV and say I never stole from my parents. I don't know if that's what I said to you.
No,
I apologise if I did.
You said that you weren't intentionally doing it all the time, and
I mean, there were times where I crept
yeah.
into the kitchen when my mum was in the living room, unzipped her purse quietly and took £10 out and did that, like, not on a regular basis, but I certainly stole from my parents. The disease will have you steal from your nearest and dearest and lie to their face about it. Like, I could have been caught with the £10 note in my hand and I'd have still sworn blind that I didn't have it. I didn't steal from you. But I guess, like I said, we're called to forgive, and my parents did that. I don't know how they did it. I don't know if I could do that. I hope that I never am asked to find out. But they forgave to such a high standard, to such a relentless level. Like I'm in awe of them, really. You know.
We've got a couple of emails here. Well, first of all, Dylan's asking where you got your hoodie from.
Oh yeah, I like it.
Yeah. Where did you get that from? Dylan. It's good, isn't it? Yeah.
So it came from a site online.
Yeah.
You don't have to put much in your search engine to find. I think it's Christian hoodies or something. I'm not sure.
I used to have a sticker that said Jesus Christ like that. He's the real thing, because Coca-Cola was saying the real thing at the time. And also I had one, Carpenter from Nazareth Seeks Joiners. I think everybody had that one, didn't they? Also LW emails in, rebellion against God is definitely not recommended. The result for Satan and the angels that fell with him will be the lake of fire. The result for Adam and Eve was catastrophic. I couldn't get that word out, for the human race and the planet, but thank God for full, complete obedience of our Redeemer, Jesus Christ, to God our Father. The result is eternal life for us as we have been accepted in him. Just a couple more here. I'll leave that one. Good evening at Revelation TV. Bless you, Brother Sid Thurlow. Very encouraging. Jeremiah 29 verse 11, Psalm 112, I'll pass these on to you. Psalm 112 verses 1 to 9, that's from Trev in Harrogate, where Yorkshire tea comes from. That's what I always remember, that's where Yorkshire tea comes from. So anyway, sorry, Ali.
No, sorry.
I was just thinking I need to get some Yorkshire tea. I love my Yorkshire tea.
I think it's it's interesting how you talk, because you can see the difference in you, because you're being very honest about how you've gone through this at points where you were stealing from your parents and you'd swear blind. And I think now you see that difference in yourself, which is you can't sit here and lie about any of it, and you've come face to face with it. I think there'll be many people who are watching that perhaps haven't yet come face to face, not necessarily your situation, but with depression, with anxiety, with things that have happened in their past. What advice, I guess, would you give them? It can be scary, it can be petrifying to come face to face with things that affect and have built our characters. You know, we as Christians have God and we can put our complete trust in him. But that is difficult in itself to do. What advice would you give people who are facing battles today?
Do you know what? There's something that is key here, and that is the truth will set you free. And I know that's an old Christian cliche, but it stood the test of time because it's beautiful, it's perfect, it's gold dust. If you keep something in the dark, it grows. When you live in the light, the exposure of the light will kill it. Lies keep us sick. And that doesn't matter if we're talking about heroin addiction, or if we're talking about cheating on your wife, or if we're talking about something on a much smaller scale, consequentially in the world today. God sees sin as sin, and there are no grades in there. It's black and white. Fortunately, God's grace sees us forgiven for our sin when we repent. But the truth of the matter is we continue to sin when we keep it secret and we hide our little secret behaviours away from everybody. When we bring them into the light, when we expose them to the light, they die. And it's as simple as that. So if you're struggling with anything that is deceptive, addiction in its many different colours and shapes and sizes, or betrayal, lying to your spouse or your parents. Do you know what the toughest one is? Lying to yourself. When you can't admit that these behaviours are damaging your chance at being all that God created you to be. When we lie to ourselves about our reality, when we say, yeah, I like cakes and I like chips and I like bad food, but it's all right, it's all right. I've worked hard, I deserve it. That's a lie. We need to recognise that even in these small behaviours, they stop us.
Can you pray for me now, please?
They stop us from being the best version of ourselves that we can be. And God wants the best for us. God's plan and will for us is that we be the best versions of ourselves, the very versions that he created us to be. And when we lie to ourselves about negative, destructive behaviours, we put a block on us being the best versions of ourselves we can be. So honesty is my advice. That's really hard.
And for me, I think sometimes the things that we allow into our lives, or we allow them to stay there because we almost become comfortable with them, and it becomes our identity a little bit rather than God being our identity. I remember just a few weeks ago, our anxiety comes and goes with waves for me, and I sometimes will wake up with it, and I don't even know where it's come from. Maybe it's a nightmare I've had in the night, but I wake up and it's just there, and my heart's pumping and I can't go back to sleep. And I remember a Saturday morning a few weeks ago, I couldn't pinpoint what it was. What was the trigger? What was causing it? I didn't know what I was nervous about. I was coughing. I was feeling anxious. And I said to Naomi, I've had enough. I've absolutely had enough feeling like this. And I don't know where it's come from. I've been like it for 2 days. I went into the bathroom and I said, God, you're going to have to deal with this. And I prayed and prayed, and something lifted off me, and I couldn't account for about 5 minutes. Naomi says, I wasn't sure if you're okay, but I said to her, I'm going in there. If you hear anything weird, right, it's because I'm getting with God, and this needs to come off me. And I remember praying, and I said, whatever's causing it, whatever's oppressing me right now, you get off of me. And this anxiety goes. And I literally felt my hands shake, shudder, and something like a weight just lift off of me. And it only happened, Sid, when I actually got fed up with what it was I was carrying, and literally I was watching a YouTube video which had some worship on, and it went from halfway through the YouTube video, and literally I couldn't account for maybe 7 minutes. Naomi said, you're in there ages. I said, no, I've only been in there 2 minutes. Something really spiritual happened, and I felt just lighter for the rest of that time,
Do you know, there's something here that I feel really strongly about. We were created for connection and relationship. This is something that I feel so strongly about. The fact that you have Naomi and you had the chance to share with her and to get honest about it and to share it. And then you went in the bathroom and you shared it with God.
Yeah.
And so this connection, this relationship that you lived in, you spoke it out, you shared it, you unburdened yourself from it, and in so doing, you released yourself from it. God released you from it in a super spiritual way.
What I'm saying is that I almost allowed it to be there for a while, And I think sometimes we have coping mechanisms. We think, well, it's just part of me, and it's something I'm more. And sometimes there are things that are the thorn in the flesh, stuff that we have to carry. Okay. And I probably will come back to fighting anxiety again. It's a battle that I keep fighting. But I'm not wanting to let it rule me, So
in answer to that question, sorry to speak over you, the advice that I would give is to talk about it.
Yeah.
We were created with connection in mind. God truly created us to share the love that he had within the Trinity. And that means relationship. And this element of just talking is such a massive deal in today's world.
This is something I want to touch on, and I'm getting excited about this. You can tell, right? So, we were speaking before we went live. Sorry, keeping it from you.
Yeah.
But you mentioned that you still are in contact with a couple of people that you went to prison with, and you had relationship with them. Now, the Bible verse I want to read is something that a lot of questions and I think debates come up about as well. And it's the one which speaks about, do not be yoked together with unbelievers, for what do righteousness and wickedness have in common, or what fellowship can light have with darkness? 2 Corinthians 6:14. Now, this is interesting because when I first read this verse, I thought this just meant in a relationship factor, and it's actually, Dave taught me more than that. It's, friends, work colleagues, whoever you're associating yourself with. Now, I'm quite actually a strong believer in that we need to reach out, because Jesus did, to those people who are not necessarily religious, but the people in need. how do you do that? Because I'm sure there's people out there that have family issues, they might not have unbelievers, and we've had some viewers email in before, that's why I want to say it, is because they've almost distanced themselves from these people because they are unbelievers. Yeah. How do you do that without, and how do you interpretate that verse without kind of, do you know what I'm trying to say? I don't know what I'm trying to say.
Can I just say, we were talking about this week, weren't we? Because as a pastor, pastor, as she says. Yeah, she's from
pastor as well.
You end up living your whole life in church quite often, and end up doing everything to do with, and you end up working with believers. You know, here at Rev TV, blah, blah, wherever you may be. And we were talking about this, weren't we, Sid? Because I felt the last couple of years that my ministry is probably 50% outside the church and 50% inside the church. Mm-hmm. And even in these last 2 weeks, we've been invited to parties, places where some Christians would feel uncomfortable. And I've been places there, and people just start speaking to me. And I've not even courted it. I've not even said, but they find out you're a Christian or you're a pastor, and suddenly they want to talk to you. And I don't want to preempt what you're going to say, but for me, it's about being strong in who you are and your identity in Christ, that you're actually able to walk into places where you are, not that you're never going to be tempted or get into sin, but you're able to be strong enough in your faith to say, actually, I can exist in this environment and I can be a light in the darkness. And also, I don't have to be like everybody else here, but also don't have to be the weird Christian here either. I can actually be somebody that they all like and get on with as well. So I don't know. So anyway, it says, yeah.
We are called to be in the world, but not of the world. And so we are lamps that need to be put on a lampstand. You don't put the lamp under the bed. And so we have to be, in order for us to be Jesus' hands and feet in this world, in order to be salt and light, we have to put ourselves in these positions. That doesn't mean that I can go and hang around with the people I used to hang around with. That would be madness. That would be insanity. But I can connect with those people to show them that there is another way. It doesn't have to be this way. There is an alternative. And to show them what that alternative looks like in my actions, in my words, in my authentic living, in the way that I reflect God's love and God's light out into the world. And so if we don't put ourselves in places where there's darkness, then how bright does our light shine, you know? And so we have to go out and be God's hands and God's feet. And I really do believe that. But that doesn't mean that I need to go and hang around with all the people that I used to hang around with. That simply means that I need to stay in touch and to let them know I'm always here if you want someone to talk to. And to, like, Facebook's a funny thing for me because I do think it's really dangerous. We fall into the comparison trap so easily, compare ourselves to other people's highlight reels, and it's just nonsense, a lot of it. But I use it to say life can be different. When you walk with Jesus, when you live out of the love that God has for you, for me, when I get to love in such a way because God loved me first, then I want to show people what that love looks like in my actions, in my daily walk, not just at church, not just with the people it's really easy to do it with, but with the people that cheese me right off sometimes, with the people who get up my nose. I can love those people too. And it's in the darkness that our lights really get to shine brightly. So we have to be aware, like, if you go to wet places, you'll get wet. So if I go to drug dens and think I can spend my time in there talking about Jesus, eventually I'm going to get wet if I go to a place where it's wet all the while. So I need to recognise that I wouldn't dream of going to a drug den, that would be madness. But I can go back to Ipswich, which is where I'm from, which is where the community of people are from, and I can visit for an evening. I can go to an NA meeting and I can show a presence of a better way without soaking myself in that environment. So I think that we can't go back to where we came from and live there. Well, not for me anyway. I think it's different for everybody. Some people can get clean in their community, can become a Christian and still be part of that community. But I can't do that.
That takes strength, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. It really does. And I think you're putting yourself at risk. I guess it depends on where in your walk you are. In 10 years' time, I might be able to go back and live in Ipswich, and I might be able to shine God's light. At the moment, I've got to balance it, and I've got to be really careful, and I've got to do what is safe as well as what is right, you know. So
yeah, good.
I hope
That's
that
sensible.
helps in some ways. Yeah.
We've got a few emails. We'll come to these. Thank God for Jesus. Keep up the truth, Sid. That's from John in Dublin. And they went to an Irish accent there, I won't do that. Good evening to you all. I struggle with alcohol and drug addiction for over 20 years. I smoke skunk, weed and legal highs and love the stuff, so could never see how I was going to be free. I had years of therapy and found myself just getting worse and worse, and now even getting addicted to the prescription medication I was on. That kind of is an addictive mentality, isn't it, coming through there? Yeah. And so at the end of my tether, I tried a Christian counsellor who eventually led me to Christ. Still struggled for a couple of years after this, but then was totally set free during my baptism. And I've been completely clean now for over 8 years, and I've managed to go back to university and graduate with a degree in law, which I didn't know Ellie has got. Now happily serving God through this fantastic job. He's blessed me and loving it. So that's brilliant. Thank you. It's great testimony, isn't it? Yeah, yeah. Hi everyone, I do not doubt Sid's sincerity when he claims Jesus saved him from a life of drug addiction and crime, but I'd point out that other people have successfully overcome these things by thinking about Krishna and Buddha and other... Well, yeah, so he's making the point that there's lots of people who've overcome drugs who are not Christians.
Okay.
I think that you'd agree with that, wouldn't you? That
people
have got rid of that lifestyle but not necessarily become a Christian.
Yeah.
So Eddie, yes. I think we would agree that people...
It's not the way that I'd suggest to
do it. No, and obviously I know we're talking from a Christian perspective, but there will be those who've actually overcome it.
People have overcome, drugs through just going through, I guess, a normal... You said NA, is it NA?
NA, yeah.
Okay, if I can just say here that I didn't manage to break free from drugs through church. So I'm a Bible-believing, Jesus-loving follower of Christ, but God recognised my limitations, and the people in church were not equipped to deal with my addiction. I went to NA, Narcotics Anonymous, and I work a 12-step program, and that is what keeps me clean. And I feel that God has given me that. Yeah. In addition to that, I do... I'm part of a ministry called Believers in Recovery, which is a movement that is one step between church and NA. It's for people who don't get enough church in NA and don't get enough recovery in church. And that is an amazing stepping stone in between the two. Today's society struggles to walk through the door of church. Absolutely. Church, in its preacher and stand up, sit down and sing hymns and sing songs, is so far removed from what young people find in their world that they don't connect with it. And so Believers in Recovery really offers something that allows people in situations like myself, in addiction, in tough situations, people that have no faith, some faith and great faith, people who have been directly or indirectly affected by addiction can come to Believers in Recovery and meet other people like them and share their journeys, learn from other people who have longered in the road, build up and edify people who are at the beginning of their journey. It's that connection and that community again.
Absolutely.
I can't shout loudly enough about NA, Believers in Recovery, and Jesus and church. And for some people, it might be other things, you know?
Yeah. Well, we've got a few more coming in here. Great programme. Thank you for such honesty. That's from Jeanette. Thank you, Jeanette, for that. I have family members who are struggling with alcohol and drugs. All I can do is pray that God will get hold of them. That's also from Jeanette as well. A separate message there. Hi, I'm watching your show, and though I would tell you that God does sometimes deliver people instantly and permanently, he delivers from chain smoking many years ago, and 2 years later he again miraculously delivered me from alcohol. To this day I still am in awe of everything he has done in my life. Too numerous to tell you in a text. That's from Anne. Bless you, Anne, thanks for that. And finally, you got a fan here.
All right, come on.
Love watching Sid opening up on TV. So heartwarming to listen to his words, knowing of difficult times back there in Ipswich. And that's from somebody called Buffs.
Yes, Buffs.
Yeah, two
Come
kisses.
on.
Thank you very much.
Yes, I used to play football with Buffs.
Oh, do you know?
Yeah,
Oh,
I
right,
know
so,
he
yeah,
is.
yeah,
Bless
yeah,
you.
yeah.
See, this is a non-Christian who has taken an interest in my journey and it is just pulling for me, and just so glad to see that life is in the right place. And I hope that somehow Buffers hears of Jesus through my
What's his real
testimony.
name? Oh, that
Richard
name,
Buffrey.
But
Yeah, he's brilliant. Like, I'm so
love that,
made
yeah,
up
yeah.
to have that he's emailed in and that. Like, and that he's following. He's tuned into Revelation TV.
But you know what? It's interesting because I noticed earlier as well when you were speaking about the moment you were in prison and you saw that guy playing football and you were like, really? He's not wearing sandals. And you said something quite profound, and you said he made Christianity credible. And I think we all face that quite often. You know, when I guess people that aren't Christians hear that I do Christian TV, they're like, oh, really? You know, what are you doing? Just
That's a
throwing
compliment.
Bibles at the camera, yeah. But you know, the thing is, I think you have to. There's been this stereotypical thing where I think young people, not just young people, but some older people these days as well, you know, they don't understand what Christianity is, and really, we're all normal, you know, we don't go around throwing books at people, but what we do is we provide a support network. We provide, I believe, a really incredible testimony of, you know, of Jesus and how he acts. And whatever I say to people is, if you just read, if they're a non-Christian, they just read about what Jesus did for people, that is who I aim to be in my life. You know, don't get me wrong, I do not have the ability to be able to make someone not blind, but I can pray for people. I can, you know, share the hope and the gift that Jesus gave us and the salvation that we have. And if that's what I can share with them, then that's great. And I think, you know, that's something that I found really profound in your testimony, was the fact that you said he made Christianity credible. And I think if we all work towards something, that is what I want to work towards for reaching out to many.
And you've got that, Ellie. You really have.
Great.
And you got. I know you've got a group of friends who will have differing degrees of faith and so on. And you're in the middle of that, and you really are the only Bible that they'll ever know, to the point where they are now. And so you don't have to have all the answers. You just have to be somebody who says, you know what, I am genuinely following Jesus. I've not got all the answers for you. I had somebody the other week at a party. Somebody came to me, they were dressed up in fancy dress, said, right, you're a pastor, prove to me there's a God. I said, I don't need to prove to you there's a God. I said, that's not my job.
I'm not a lecturer.
I said, I'm here having a drink, I'm having some fun. Yeah. But then we had a really great conversation, and you know, those conversations will really come at times, and God's got you there for purpose. So don't think that I'm not meant to be with these people, because that's probably where you're meant to be. The only thing I would say is that you make sure that you keep when you go into those places with people, that you keep your Christian friends around you who are going to build you up and encourage you, because you need both. And but yeah, you are definitely a witness.
I think for someone your age, you make Christianity credible to the people that you choose to surround yourself
What about
with.
my age, Sid? We're both, me and Ellie are both young, aren't we, Ellie?
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah,
You
I'm
turned
45.
22 last week, didn't you, Dave?
But I think
can't sit on a Christian TV channel and say that, sorry.
it's so important for us to see people like us in that Christian environment. If we as Christians expect other people to take us seriously, then we need to, you know, we need to look credible. And so I'm sure that you do that for your peer group. And it's so important that Jesus has followers that represent society. I think we've come close to a place where people in church don't so much look like society. And in some ways, we're called to not conform to the ways of the world. And so we do need to be set apart, but we still need to be credible and relevant.
You need to be weird for the right reason.
Yeah.
That's weird because you're weird.
We all don't have sandals on, it's okay.
You got Doc Martens on, haven't you?
No, they're not Doc Martens, unfortunately.
All right.
How long have we got, Bjorn? 21 seconds we have, but I just want to say thank you so much, Sid, for joining us. I think your testimony is going to reach so many people out there, more than we can imagine, and I think it provides hope and a lot of encouragement to those that are really stressing about their life currently, and I think it's really appreciated. I want to thank you. Stay tuned. We will be back with Voice in the Wilderness next, and we'll see you very soon.